Good morning, everybody. Boy, it's great to see everybody here and ready to go with this great conference. And I have the honor of being the moderator for this first session. And it's when Meg and I talked about it, we tried to think about, well, how can we make this interesting for you, and what subject should we do? So doing the program planning and design stuff that we do, we're always trying to look into the future many years and try to understand what kind of things might impact what we're doing. So we were talking about policy and trying to think in a broad way, how can we understand future policy and actually, impact and see how we can affect future policy and make things happen. So we've got three great speakers with lots of experience and background in this area. And we're going to try to look at it from the national level, the regional and state level. So we can try to look at that. So we have David Lee from EPA, and I'll tell you more. We have KATERI CALLAHAN from Alliance to Save Energy, and Jean Rodriguez, all great people. But we also wanted to talk about a different way to do this time, and what we're going to do is we're going to actually make it much more informal. I've always wanted to do something like a late night talk show, so I kind of thought I'd be like David Letterman without the bad monologue. So we're going to start and have people come in, and we're just going to sit down and start a conversation ourselves about policy, and then we're going to invite you in as well to have questions about what we do for the policy and other things that affect you with this. So we're going to try this time. I'm going to start. I even get to sit down and do these things, put on my glasses so I can read. So the first session, our first guest today, is going to be David Lee. And David's with the U.S. Department of Energy, and you can see he's a supervisor of residential building technologies programs at DOE. He served as a director for the residential branch, overseeing Energy Star, new and existing home programs at the Environmental Protection Agency, so he's been there. Prior to Energy Star program, he was the branch chief responsible for the regulatory program to phase out the ozone-depleting chemicals at EPA. So he's been involved in this area and policy for quite a long time. And I always ask our speakers a little bit about themselves. And David just got back from a trip to India. So if you get to talk to David later on, maybe you can ask him about that too. So if you can help me welcome David Lee. David?
Thank you.
So, David, I'd like you to start, if you would, to really talk about 2 or 3 things that you think are the most important changes we could make in policy over the next 3 to 5 years that we could make improvements to energy efficiency.
Well, let me start with the long ball. Okay. Let me kind of put something out there that really, I think, it could be a significant game changer, but involves quite a few people. And back in D.C., if you are paying attention to the discussions and the debates that have happened over the past, since the election and prior to the election, there's been a lot of talk about tax reform. And that got us thinking about, well, if you were to reform some of the tax laws and close up the loopholes, one of the major deductions that people enjoy is the interest rate deduction that goes along, that you can take on your income tax for the interest that you're paying on your home. Well, what if you were to eliminate that and replace that with a deduction that you could take on your mortgage if that home is an energy efficient home? Say it's an Energy Star home or a DOE challenge home, or it has been improved by 30%. Now, that would require literally an act of Congress. But it would be a significant game changer. There'd be quite a few people involved and a lot of political constituencies they'd have to think through. But that's what I would kind of offer as kind of what I was calling the long ball, and what, if you really were to go for the fence, what would you try for? Now, backing down from that, and what can we do? What can the Department of Energy do? What can you do? In my program, working on promotion of voluntary energy efficiency programs, A lot of utilities, many utilities will use the TRC, the Total Resource Cost Test. And as I try to, and the people that I work with back at DOE, as well as EPA, look at whole house retrofit programs, the TRC, those programs do not measure up well in the TRC. And there are several, what we perceive to be issues with the TRC and how it is used, related to the discount rate that's used in the calculation of the TRC. The lifetime of the measures, we think, disadvantages the calculation of a retrofit program. It's a residential, home residential retrofit program. And so I think there could be a lot of work that could be done kind of at our level as well as at your level. The third possibility is an idea that's been kicked around by my boss, Roland Risser, is, one of the biggest issues out there in terms of residential is code compliance. And although the codes have been ratcheting up, as you might be aware, and they're becoming more stringent, one of the biggest problems, the biggest problem I think we perceive, is the lack of compliance or lack of enforcement. And if there would be some way that a utility could somehow help enforce those codes and then be able to take credit for the energy efficiency savings by helping to enforce that code. So those are my three ideas.
Great. And to help enforce the codes, what areas, what ways could you see the utilities doing that in conjunction with what DOE does?
Well, I think, what we would like to see is, a kind of, and I think probably will need to be done for the 2015 codes if we really kind of get very serious about the stringency of the code. I think we'll be looking at performance-based testing. And many utilities who run residential programs are familiar with the home energy rating system, familiar with the organization ResNet, and actually use home energy raters to participate in their voluntary programs. But I could see where a utility charged with enforcing compliance of codes could use a home energy rater to go in and to actually evaluate and determine that the home has met the 2009 or the 2012 or whatever code that the state or locality has adopted.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to bring out our next speaker. KATERI Callahan with the Alliance to Save Energy brings over 25 years of experience to her role as president of the Alliance, and she's served as president since 2004. She's a source of credible information for many different groups in her role, doing environmental and national security issues, other kinds of things that she deals with. But interesting, she's also one of the first Energy Efficiency Hall of Fame Award winners, which I didn't even know there was one, but now we do. I also asked her about herself. She's also an avid cyclist and even tries to cycle when she can the 15 miles to work. So help me welcome KATERI Callahan.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Nice job.
So I'm going to ask you the same question. What are the 2 or 3 kinds of recommendations you have, policy, looking out in the forward 3 to 5 years that could really make a difference and impact?
Well, Rick, we're at the Alliance to Save Energy. We commissioned something called the National Energy Efficiency Policy Commission early this year to look at the next generation of energy efficiency policy and how we drive forward beyond what we've been able to accomplish over the last 35 years. And the first thing the commission did, which I am hopeful that we are going to be able to get many, many others all across the country to adopt, is to set a goal. Because as we know, looking at businesses, as we know, looking at state utility commissions, if you set a goal on energy efficiency, then you can begin to find the ways and the means to get to that goal. So the goal that they decided to adopt wasn't just an energy efficiency goal, it's an energy productivity goal, because they wanted it to be very, very clear that what we're looking at is improving the economy through energy efficiency, not just saving energy. That goal is pretty audacious. It's to double energy productivity in the United States between now and 2030. So what we are hoping is that others will adopt that goal, businesses across the country, state policy leaders, local leaders, but particularly at the national level. The commission is led by Senator Mark Warner of Virginia and Tom King, who's the president and CEO of National Grid. And all the policies underneath it, which we can talk about to some extent. We're rolling them out, the recommendations, next week, so I can't step on our big announcement in Washington, D.C. But we have made recommendations economy-wide. And some of the things that David talked about, building codes, appliance standards, where we've had such great success in the past, are things that we will be looking to take forward and really look at the next generation of how we proceed with those. Also, government leadership by example. The Department of Energy has done a wonderful job. This president, and we'll probably talk about that, has done a wonderful job. But the U.S. government's the largest single energy user in the country. And state and local governments in their own rights are big users of energy and have a very important role in terms of leadership and market transformation because of the buying power they have with their purses. So those are a couple of areas that I think you can see us. Also, the whole notion of educating and engaging. That's another area where we really need to put in place public policies, and I think we can do so because there's so much bipartisan support for becoming more energy productive, for using energy efficiency, not just for environmental reasons, but also for the economic and the energy security reasons.
Are there any regional and state-related policies that you see that you think should change as well in conjunction with these?
Yes, I think that where we look at is the regulations at the state level. I think as an approach that the commission took and that the Alliance has always taken is that you don't use the federal government to hammer the states and the localities. That's never going to work effectively as engaging at that level. So in particular, and for a lot of the audience members here, we look at the Alliance looking at rate regulatory reform and getting that paradigm correct so that energy efficiency is a resource on an equal or a level playing field with other generation resources. So to us, that's a very, very important way to unleash investment in the utility sector, which has proven critical to our ability to drive energy efficiency.
Great, thank you. Last but not least, we're going to have our next expert, Gene Rodriguez of Southern California Edison, join us. Gene is Director of Customer Energy Efficiency and Solar for Southern California Ed. He also serves on a plethora of boards and has been networked throughout this industry quite a while, just a few of them. He's with ACEEE, Consortium for Energy Efficiency, a China-U.S. Energy Efficiency Alliance, which I wasn't aware of before, California's Low Income Oversight Board, and in 2012, the Environmental Protection Agency presented him with a 2012 Climate Leadership Award for individuals. So I asked a little bit about Gene, his interest, and he lives in Manhattan Beach, which is the volleyball mecca of the world, according to beach volleyball mecca of the world, according to him. So Saturday mornings, you can find Gene, AKA Spike, trying to regain his lost glory, he says, of his youth. But really, his Olympic specialty is talking, if you know Gene. And he had the pleasure of being an MC for an actual award Olympic medalist Carrie Walsh and her foundation to raise funds for a volleyball contest just a couple weeks ago. So help me welcome Gene Rodriguez.
Wait!
What now?
Rick, what is this?
That's water, Gene.
Water? This is tap water.
Yeah.
You say to this group of people, these good people, that you want to be a game show host or a talk show host. You say you aspire to be David Letterman. Well, my friend, I come from Hollywood, California, and I can tell you, you are no David Letterman. Because David Letterman would know, as all these people do, that you must bow down as a host and pay attention to the demands of your guests. Everybody in this room knows that Aerosmith will not play a concert unless there's a bowl of green M&Ms backstage waiting for them. Everybody in this room knows that Beyonce would not perform on Letterman unless her dressing room were filled with a sea of white orchids. And everybody in this room knows that you cannot ask a Californian to truck across the country, where it's now 5:30 in the morning according to my bio clock, and serve them water. My friend, I demand a bucket of caffeine or I refuse to speak.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Just right here. Just right here.
I stand humbled. Thank you, sir.
Never mind.
I actually had vodka.
You're
I haven't
East
tried
Coast.
mine yet. Maybe I should.
As we go. Well, Gene, what are your ideas, or what do you think recommendations are, policy for the next 3 to 5 years, especially on the state and regional level? What do you think can make a difference?
Well, you might have guessed, I made that big stink as a diversionary tactic because sitting backstage listening to David KATERI, it's really hard to add anything because David brought what I think is essential, which is a sense of scale, acting in a massive way to make efficiency work. KATERI brought the other half of the equation, which is finding policies that you can get many people to come around, industry types, environmental types, policy wonks, people in industry, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the only thing I can add, I think, is in the end, I think, Rick, what we need to do is to quit trying to make efficiency special, trying to make efficiency virtuous, trying to make efficiency intelligent, and make it commonplace, pervasive, and boring. Something that you see every single day and don't think twice about. And it's not something you have to do. In your homes, it becomes part of the way you live. As you buy your home, it becomes part of the product that you buy. As you buy other products, it becomes built in to the efficiency. As David brought out in terms of codes and standards, it becomes almost impossible to find bad products, poorly engineered to waste energy. In terms of how we deal with things, I think we need to find a way to quit educating and start making sure that people are just doing. And that, I think, is the key to the policies that we need to fix. So they have to be at scale, they have to bring people together, and in the end, they just have to get the job done.
So what are the obstacles that keep that from happening today that we need to try to address?
I see two of them, both at the state, regional, and national levels. One of them is funding. Let's be honest. If we're going to try in this room of professionals is going to try to rebuild the energy-consuming infrastructure of our entire country, in fact, our entire North American energy-consuming infrastructure, then we're going to take a tremendous amount of funding to make that happen. And this is where I think the boring part comes in. I think the real heroes of the funding revolution are not going to be people in D.C. or people who wear robes or whatever to go to work. It's going to be really boring resource planner types. Because in the end, I really come back to, in every city, in every province, in every state, all across North America, there are people who are sitting in little rooms with plastic pocket protectors and slide rules still, figuring out how to spend money on creating a system and a series of purchases that will fulfill the energy requirements for the next 20 years. And what this room needs, what this industry demands, is that a substantial portion of that money ought to be spent on cost-effective, truly cost-effective, reliable, affordable energy efficiency, because that just makes sense. And that doesn't sound exciting, it doesn't sound boring, and it's not the thing to make a speech about, but it gets the job done. That's barrier number one. Barrier number two is, I'm going to tip my hat to KATERI and friends. Barrier number two is, for far too long, we've had this kind of competitive atmosphere. Who does it better? Is it the market or is it regulation? Is it the utility or is it a non-utility actor? Is it the environmental space or is it the economy? I would say yes to all of that. What we need to do is find ways to bring this group, This is the Association of Energy Service Professionals, but it's not really an association. This is more than an association. It's even more than a movement. This is an industry. Look at the sea of faces out here. Good-looking faces, too, I can point out. But this sea of faces out here represents a massive industry in North America, and we need to be working together to make sure that this happens.
Great. Thank you, all three of you. But I'd like to start out, I'll throw out the first question. Be thinking about your questions yourselves. That we're going to have the audience participate in a minute. But let's talk about with the administration being reelected, what does that bode for us as we think about the next 4 years and such? What do you think that means for us to be in what's going to happen with things for policy funding, other things like that? And David, do you want to start with that?
At the big picture back in Washington, I certainly cannot answer anything more than one who reads the Washington Post. But I do think if people watch the president's address, inauguration address, his emphasis on energy efficiency, also his emphasis on climate change. A lot of that does depend, again, on an act of Congress. But I want to give one example, kind of going inside the bureaucracy and kind of what happens. So I've been with the federal government since Ulysses Grant was president, and so every year you prepare a budget, and you start at the ground level. You start building up your budget, and you send it over to this place called the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, and they always reduce the amount of money that you ask for. And I've been now at the Department of Energy for 3 years, and the first 2 years, we've sent over a budget, over to Office of Management Budget, and they have actually increased the amount of money for energy efficiency and energy efficiency research. And I think that is a sign of what the administration, because OMB is speaking on behalf of the president, and that is showing his indication, the administration's indication, of their support for energy efficiency. Now, it does go to the Hill, and there's a lot of wrangling that goes back and forth, and we really have never had a budget for the past couple of years. We've been working off of continuing resolutions, but I think that shows you at least the commitment of this administration at a time when people and the administration is committed to debt reduction.
KATERI?
Yeah, I would agree with David. We've been very pleased as advocates for increased RD&D funding at the Department of Energy for energy efficiency. The president's role there and OMB's role is critically important because the budget axes are swinging up on Capitol Hill, and the higher the request, the more you have, the more power you have not to get it cut back too far. So I think that's a very good indicator. But what I would say to all of you, and not as a political statement, but as an advocate statement, I don't think there's ever been a better champion for energy efficiency in the White House than this president. And I agree that it's going to be tough to get things done on Capitol Hill this year, but the president has found ways to work with industry and through executive fiat, executive order, to move energy efficiency even without the Congress. The example I would give there is the increase in fuel economy standards to 54.5 miles by the year 2025. I also would give you as an example there the Green Button Initiative, which is a utility-led initiative, but inspired by I should say private sector-led initiative, inspired by the president, to give information, readily, easily understandable information to consumers on how they use energy in their homes so they can be empowered to make changes and save money. He has, by executive order, put forward vast improvements and goals for improvements in agencies' energy performance and the fleet performance. He also has challenged the private sector to come up with funding for ESCOs, for doing energy efficiency upgrades like he plans to do with $2 billion in ESCO funding over the next couple of years. So he's finding ways to move it forward. We're very pleased that we believe, talking to all his folks, that they're willing to engage with the Congress. And we've been talking to Republicans and Democrats in the Congress who want to do things on energy. But you know, there's fiscal constraints, there's problems with mandates, so they're looking for ways to work together. So I am very encouraged, and I don't think there's been a brighter day other than the last 4 years that we see in the coming 4 years for energy efficiency, thanks to this president and thanks to what we're seeing, the interest in the Congress.
Great. Gene?
I was fascinated, and I hope everyone else was, with what you just heard from kind of this insider's view of what's going on in D.C. Let me offer a slightly different perspective that actually builds on what David and KATERI said. So I'll start with KATERI first. You'll note that when KATERI spoke to us, she talked to us as energy efficiency advocates. And if you think about it from that perspective, think about the fact that in this room, no one is red nor blue, no one is industry nor administrator. No one here is anything other than an efficiency advocate. That being the case, I think the most important thing that we see in, I'll say personally, that I see in this current administration is the opportunity for us to make hay while the sun shines. Nobody expects any president from any party to parachute in and rescue us from climate, from the economy, from job creation, from et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What they do is create, through teaching and through opportunities that are thrown other ways, allow us to do the job that we're supposed to be doing on a local level, on the ground, on the field. So I thank God we have a president who's willing to use the words climate change again. I thank God in California that we have a state that looks at energy efficiency as a primary driver for job creation. I thank God that this room is filled with professionals who can look at whatever the policy mandate is, whether it's least cost, reliable, safe electric service, whether it's climate change at scale, whether it's market transformation, whether it's job creation. The people in this room have the answer, and it always starts off with energy efficiency. That's what I think the opportunity from DC, the opportunity from Sacramento and a state like California, that's what the opportunity is, for us to figure a way to pitch efficiency as the answer to whatever it is that ails us.
I'd like to just build on that.
Sure.
And ask the question then, you know, you talked, Gene, about our role. I'd like to go a little more, just a last question from me while the audience is thinking of their questions. Really, what can the group of, you know, us in this room do to affect and push and help make change in policy and regulation? A lot of times it sometimes feels like we're watching it happen, but how can we engage successfully to help move things while there's this opportunity? Let any of you start on this one.
I'll start. Everybody has a bully pulpit of some shape or sort. You have employees, or you know city councilmen, or you know a mayor, or you know regulators, or you know people above you in the food chain in your business. You can educate, you can engage, you can show them the way, as Gene said, to use energy efficiency for whatever is ailing that group. You can engage with organizations like the Alliance to Save Energy. You know, sign up and commit yourselves to help us double energy productivity between now and 2030, and follow the recommendations we're going to release next week as they apply to your specific segment. But it's incumbent upon all of us. None of us can do this alone, but together we can do it and get it done. And that's what we've done at the Alliance, is bring utilities together with the environmental groups, with consumer groups and labor groups. And when all of those voices unite and say, this is something we need to do, there's a voice in that group that a Republican will listen to, a conservative will listen to, a liberal will listen to. So it's up to all of us, and no one gets a pass here. We need all of you to work together in order to get this job done.
David, thoughts?
Well, you know, not so much on kind of what you could do in the policy arena, but on energy efficiency and energy efficiency in residential, which is really kind of my area. What I have noticed over the last 15 years working on Energy Star, now working at the Department of Energy, it is really the individuals in the field. We already know the technologies. If you want to retrofit a home to get 20 to 30%, we already know what the technologies are. If you want to build a home to the code of the 2012 code, we already know what needs to be done. But where I have seen successful programs, either new homes or retrofit programs, is really with the individuals running the programs and people in this audience. So often, to kind of give you some more background, bureaucracy background, so often people, and the federal government gives out grant money. And so often we see that there are grant recipients out there whose job is really simply to receive the money, go through the motions, and wait for the next grant to become available. And right now we're running the Better Buildings Neighborhood program, which is a very large grant program. And the ones that have been truly successful are those that have had individuals at your level and lower who are truly committed to energy efficiency and not simply kind of watching the clock, going through the motions. It's really kind of the work that you do. The second thing that I would emphasize, and again, it's not a policy change, but we have to stop reinventing the wheel. And I think a lot of people here, you are at this conference in order to network and to find out what's going on out there. A lot has been done by many of your members, and it's very important to find out what they have done. So we're not going back and reinventing the wheel and reinventing a square wheel, which is sometimes happens. If I hear about one more financing program that isn't connected with a strong contractor base, I'm going to scream. Financing in and of itself does not work. You need a whole program of committed administrators, committed contractors, who are able to then link that financing and sell the job to the homeowner. And so that would be kind of what I would offer to this group. Not a policy change, but just kind of how one works in this field. It does need leaders, it does need visionaries. There are people there, but I think we could do a much better job of kind of working together and being truly committed to energy efficiency.
Let me build on what David said. It occurs to me right off the bat. You know one thing we really stink at as an industry? We are not loud and proud. We are not loud and proud. How many of you out there could say, in all honesty to the other people sitting at your table, that if someone walked up to your mother and said, "What does your son or daughter do for a living?" that they could go more than one sentence down? Precious few. We keep energy efficiency our little insider secret. I'll tell you, somewhere down the road there's a solar conference. They all know what they're doing. So when I talk about loud and proud, I'm not talking about hubris. What I'm talking about as an industry, we must make the case that we are the most cost-effective way to reach climate, to make energy affordable, to create jobs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. As an industry, and an industry is just a collection of all of us, as an industry, we have been too passive, too quiet. We need to take our little secret and make it well known. That's what I think will turn the page.
Great.
If I could just kind of
Please.
riff a little bit more, and maybe take us off on a tangent, but several years ago I looked at recycling programs. Now, how many people here participate in their communities with a recycling program?
Probably everybody.
So everybody does. Are there any recyclers here? Talk about boring. But what has happened with recycling? I mean, back when I was, when my hair was in a ponytail and, I was hanging out in Ann Arbor, Michigan, eating granola and doing other things. But back then, the beginning, recycling was complicated. You had your green bottles, your brown bottles, you had your clear bottles, you had your cans. You had to take the label off the can, and then you had to step on it. And it just was very difficult, and people didn't do it. But state and local governments thought it was important, and they worked on it, and they made it simpler, and they made it more and more simple to recycle. And that's what has to happen with energy efficiency. It has to become easy for the homeowner to undertake. And I look to the recycling program, and also to point out in my research, recycling programs are not cost effective. This is something that the state and local governments have decided to undertake because their the people who live in the communities, they wanted it. They wanted it, and there are some solid waste issues that the local governments are grappling with. But it is not cost effective. But everybody now does it. And I just think that there are some lessons to learn there, and that energy efficiency also must become easy to deal with and easy to address. So.
Can I take us down that tangent a little bit more? We'll just keep up with the riff. The other thing that I think happened both with littering and recycling is the kids got engaged and involved. Right. And so I think that to the extent Gene Rodriguez funds programs that the Alliance does out in California, K through 12th grade, and then also at the university level, it is these next generations of consumers that as we engage them, as we let them understand and empower them with new tools. And I swear, I feel like my kids, they came with a certain gene that I will never have that allows them to work any computer gadget and use their phones to do anything. So it will be easier, and this next generation is going to have the ability and the technological savvy to be able to do this. But it is critically important, and particularly for you utilities that are in the room, to look at programs that go into the schools and help to educate the youngsters and the young folks out there who will be the consumers of tomorrow on how they can deploy energy efficiency.
Great. Well, now it's your turn. We'd like to open it up to questions. There's mics up front. And when you ask the question, please tell us who you are and what organization you're from, and then we'll try to direct that. We have one starting in the back. Please, sir.
Good morning, everybody. Tagi Alareza, ADM Associates. First I want to say what Gene said in regards to our parents don't know what we do. I've been trying, I totally failed. I couldn't get them to understand what I do, 30-some years. And even our bankers don't understand. They say, what do? You getting money and utilities are spending money to sell less? You don't understand that. But that is true. Most people don't know what we do. I understand for the codes would definitely raise the bar. And utilities program really incentivize measures that they are above the bar. So Washington or states can establish the bar, and utility programs have been essentially promoting measures above the bar. But to do all of those, essentially, we need, the bar can go way up, but we still need technology to meet the needs of those standards. How much are we doing in really investing in the technologies that they can improve the efficiency? A lot of big money out of Washington comes to the supply side. As soon as it's wind or solar, there is hundreds of millions of dollars or billions that go to that. When it comes to development, and especially small gadgets, when there are maybe $1 million to $10 million would be required, it is very hard to go to DOE and knock on a door for $1 million or $2 million. That's too small. There are places like NICE ERDA that they provide some funds for some innovations. And California utilities, particularly Southern California, Edison has been also promoting some of that kind of work, and that's really appreciated for the people who get involved in it. I guess my question comes to this. Should there be a different tier of TRC established for the new technology, and so utilities don't have to meet a certain TRC for the new technology, so that way they can promote new technologies. Thank you.
You want to talk about the TRC and the technologies, how that we can do that? So.
Why don't I start from a practitioner, and David, why don't you take it from the classic research end? Tagi, I think the answer is no, we don't need a different TRC for new technologies, and let me tell you why. one of the things I think we need to grapple with is not everything can be measured with mathematic certainty. Not everything can be held up to a yardstick. Is there anyone in this room who doesn't understand the common sense notion that in order to continue to plow and reap the harvest of energy efficiency, you must necessarily invest in planting the new technologies that come? We recognize that as a truth. So let's quit trying to bend math to allow us to do that and just say, in the state of California or at a federal level, we must invest in research and development of new energy-saving technologies where the market is not providing that. And then let me add just a second part to that. Where state and federal funding is necessary is where the market isn't otherwise investing. If we get to the place that KATERI was talking about, where efficiency is commonplace because everyone sees the potential of providing it, if we get to where David was talking about, where efficiency is as commonplace as recycling is today, then the market for new energy efficiency technologies becomes so great that I think private industry and private capital will flow to it. It doesn't do that today. So we have to overcome that today. But for right now, let's quit playing games with the math and just be loud as an industry and say, research and development is an important part of this cycle of getting products, services, and goods to the consumers that they need.
Well, you know, at the federal level, just talking about the type of research that is going on, and to give an example of the importance, at least within buildings and construction, people on my staff have looked into how much does the housing construction business invest in research, and it is minimal. It's less than 1%. And certainly, you know, kind of compared to kind of the IT world, where it's, you know, it's 20 to 25%. On average, U.S. manufacturers probably invest 5 to 10% in R&D, but within the residential sector, the housing industry, it's less than 1%. And so what my office does is to really, through a team, we sent out a contract, and we work with a team of building scientists under the program called Building America, and they do research on new technologies and the integration of those new technologies into new construction and existing construction. Much of my office, on a higher level, much of my office does deal with my office, I don't, but I have a parallel organization that does codes, does commercial buildings, does emerging technology. Our budget is probably $200 to $250 million to actually do that research. One of the strongest research programs we have coming out of emerging technology is our solid-state lighting program. And quite a bit of that is done in conjunction with industry. But it is, in those programs, kind of the high risk. You know, what we do is kind of fund high-risk projects and technologies to see whether they have a place, you know, in the future. They will have to become more energy efficient. Codes and standards over the past of this administration have increased dramatically. Appliance standards, they are working day and night to increase the appliance standards out on the street covered by the legislation. So there is need to kind of push that envelope because the standards, I believe, are becoming quite stringent right now, and we want to go even further. So I hope that answers your question from my perspective.
Do you want to add anything?
I agree with the standards. The codes are very, very critical to driving private sector investment. Another piece and component of that that's not a stick, if you will, but a carrot is the Energy Star program. Right. And so I think that you know, there's study after study shows, I think each dollar spent sparks $15 to $20 of private sector investment, something in that ballpark. And I think that's very, very important. What the government has to do is keep ratcheting up those standards so that the qualifications, I should say, not the standards, for the Energy Star products, because that's what leads to the ability to put standards in place. That's what drives a lot of investment. So I think those are very, very critical. And also above code and building energy code programs and voluntary programs also are effective in attracting that private sector investment. So it's a virtuous cycle. You need investment in R&D to keep the technologies going. You need incentives in the marketplace so that there's widespread acceptance. Once there's widespread acceptance, you lock in the efficiency with codes and standards, and then you do it all over again. So you keep that virtuous cycle going.
Gene, just one quick follow-up. I know in some states like Michigan, they set aside funds for pilot programs and research that aren't required to pass TRC. Does that happen in California?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, one of the things that maybe we left out a little bit of discussion, it's not just the creation of the cool new widget, it's getting it into the marketplace, right? And getting it there at scale. And these sorts of commercialization activities, sometimes we call them pilots. That's just a way to be able to do it without applying the same set of rigor to the numbers that come out of it. But the bottom line is, part of our mission, I think, in California is to help to increase and aggressively commercialize things that make sense, get them in the marketplace, so that we can do this ratcheting thing. And I want to agree with KATERI, too. David is far too modest. I think if you look for what has driven more private capital into R&D, it's that little cyan blue Energy Star label, because every manufacturer knows that when a consumer goes into Best Buy or Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever, if there are two appliances sitting there, one of them with that label, one without, they're likely to choose the one with the Energy Star label because it's a strong trust band. If you think manufacturers aren't pouring a ton of money into their product to make sure they can get that label, you're missing how the world really works. Yeah. So well done by David. Give David a hand, come on.
It's not often federal government.
I do want you to know, I actually chose that color, the cyan.
Oh, did
you?
We're going to get blue for you. Okay, next question. That's you.
Hi. Good morning, everyone. My name's Stuart Hickox. I'm with onechange.org, a nonprofit marketing organization based in Canada, but a 501c3 in the U.S. as well. And I just want to say, this is so awesome. What a great conversation. I'm glad to listen in this morning. But I also want to thank Meg for giving Eugene that caffeine, because man, you're so cool. Yeah, I love listening to you. You're awesome. And words like stop educating, start doing, make energy efficiency virtuous, those ring really profoundly strongly with me and with the groups that we advocate and work with. I mean, as an organization that mobilizes the community to get behind your programs, that's the kind of language that we really need to hear. But I disagree with you on one point. You said, kind of, stop, cost-effective energy efficiency, that's not very exciting. Well, I really disagree with that, and I think the secret is it can be exciting, and customers and people across your territories will respond to it if you give them the right message. I mean, I think the problem is we're trying to reach everybody with general messages and getting everybody to do things. If we take the time to assess who needs what and tailor messages specifically to highest yield customers, people will get excited because you're telling them stuff they want to hear. And at the risk of shameless self-promotion, I'm talking about that this afternoon at 3:30. But I do have a question as well. As I noticed when Meg asked who is in the room, not many people put up their hands when nonprofits were asked. Can you do that again? I want to see the other nonprofit people. See, not too many of us. But I want to ask you, as an organization that does marketing on a broad scale to represent and advocate and get people, real people, behind your programs and engaged in what you want and really changing things, I'd be interested to hear the panel reflect on how an organization like mine can work with utilities. How can we help you engage most effectively so that we can get people to do what you want them to do, which is to change their behavior?
But before I answer, I must stand corrected, and I will do so in front of all these people. But let me offer an explanation, because I'm used to throwing out things very glibly and then not explaining them. What's the difference in the answer that I must be corrected on? I will tell you. When I say we need to focus less on education, there's a second half to that sentence. And we need to get deeper into marketing. Now think about that. The way we've dealt with things, and especially in the utility sector, I mean, we're a boring lot. This is a world of clip-on tie wearing people. Trust me, if you see a utility person here and they're wearing a tie, pull on it. It'll pop right off. We think that the world is populated with rational economic actors. And if we only explain to them the math of energy efficiency, they will make the right investment decision instead of buying something that's cool or hip or makes them feel better, reaches their aspirations, or at least makes them feel a little more like whoever it is they want to be. The world of marketing understands that if you really want to make a big difference, quit trying to look down on people and educate them, and start taking people as they come. Figure out what it is they want to do. Figure it out what it is they think they need. And let's get real about changing the way everybody thinks, not by education, but by tapping in to what they're thinking, what they're feeling. My friends in marketing, a word we never used to use in utility. Val, when's the last time you were at a meeting within a utility where marketing was said without someone spitting on the floor afterwards? We need to get past that kind of thing. Marketing is what's going to change consumer demand. Consumer demand is what's going to make efficiency pervasive. If we really care about what we're trying to do here, we need to get more into marketing, less into being right about why we do efficiency. So what does that mean? For all of you who have marketing degrees, for all of you who work with nonprofits, for all of you who touch real people and want to bring them to utilities, what you need to do is keep knocking on the door and keep explaining to us that you have a better way. It might not be as tidy, it might not be as neat, but it's going to be more effective. And utility people respond to effective.
So to continue what I thought I heard on the question, though, how can the utilities and I would say their implementers work better with the nonprofit world to get more effect?
I think there are two things. Two things, so off the bat, I've got Andrea Horwath sitting here, the second most brilliant woman in the room. The first is sitting right here to my left.
Thank you.
But Andrea Horwath's from my measurement and verification team, and one of the things.
Meg's coming out with a hammer.
And Meg, but I will say, but all kidding aside, the thing we need, kind of on the utility administrator side or the program administrator side, is we need to get past all of this chit-chat and spats over attribution. Because what that winds up doing is you can create this tail wagging the dog situation. If attribution is king, it must be shown with a great degree of certainty that the energy savings behavior or adoption was the result of this $3 incentive, then that is the enemy of partnerships with people who are actually operating in the real world. So that's thing number one, policy thing. Mike Messenger, pick up your pen right now. In the evaluation community, we must find a way around the attribution paradox. Certainly attribution is important to making sure the dollars are well spent, but if it keeps us from doing something that we know is going to be effective, let's find a way around that. The second thing around that is when you're pitching a utility, quite frankly, again, I made a little glib joke about we're big on effectiveness, but we're monitored, we're rewarded, or we're punished by what we can prove. So again, I think the pitch is, what's the business sense of partnership? And partnership is actually, if you think about it, for the lawyers in the room, a true partnership is a business model, not just people who are doing good things holding hands together. We need to find ways to tap into that.
Great.
Could I, from the nonprofit side, and we work with a lot of utilities across the country and actually some outside the U.S. as well. Partnership, I think, is the key there. With respect to marketing, we've done public service ads, PSAs, and we've done it with funding from the federal government, from EPA and DOE, paired with funding from utilities and state energy offices. And what that allowed us to do was to put together ads for TV and for radio that went all across the country and that we didn't have to buy time for because they're public service ads. So they would be co-branded with the government symbols, with the state, in the state where it showed. If they had put funding, it would have that on, and it would be labeled with ours. The utilities gave us funds, they helped us with the creative, they helped us with market research. They were partners in it, and they didn't need attribution. They couldn't have attribution, or it would no longer be a public service ad. So I think that's a way that there can be a good working relationship. We also are just starting a program with publicly owned utilities to aggregate their ability to provide rebates to attract retailers to work with them on programs. Because a Sears, when you go to them and you say, well, I want to do a rebate program in my territory, they say, great, how many stores across the nation can be involved in that? And so if you can aggregate utilities and bring them together, be a convener, that's another way that a nonprofit, I think, can be a good partner to utilities and help them to really move their agenda along with moving the nonprofits. In our case, it's to advance energy efficiency. So I think there are very good ways to work together, but there has to be something in it for both sides.
Great. Well, we've run out of time. I want to have you help me thank our panel for spending time with us today. Thanks so much.